Well, we are here today with somebody who's never told her story on a podcast, and it's exciting to hear. And we're very happy to meet Cary Dominguez coming from San Diego. Welcome, Cary.
Welcome,
Thank
Cary.
you.
Glad you're here.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
And how would you like to, we know you're organized about it, but how would you like to tell your story? And, it is strange to kind of put like, how do I tell my story of my life? But however
Yeah,
you'd like to
yeah.
start.
Well, I have actually written a lot of it out because I started working with an adoption-centered therapist almost a year ago. And she suggested that writing it out can be very helpful and therapeutic. So, but I'm not going to read everything I've written.
Was she the
I,
first therapist who, or I mean, maybe it's your first therapist ever, but was she the first therapist who understood adoption?
Mm-hmm.
yes,
Isn't that incredible at this late stage in life that it took
yeah,
this long to find somebody? I always have to highlight stuff like that because it is astounding with
Mm-hmm.
all the information that has been out there for medical professionals, psychiatric professionals, and still it's so underserved.
yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah,
rant over.
I actually have a history of therapy, and I'll get into that at some point because my parents were pretty progressive for their time. And but yes, my most recent therapist that I've known for years, who's wonderful, as I started coming out of the fog and wanting to examine this a little more, I talked to her about it, but I found that I was spending a lot of time explaining
Mm.
adoption, um, explaining what I'd been through, what I was feeling and everything. And I know she was trying, but if you're not an adoptee, you
Yeah.
really just can't get it,
Yeah.
no
You're
matter
like
how much you
educating the
care.
therapist. Yes.
Yeah. So I'll just start at the beginning. I'm a baby scoop era adoptee. I was born in 1964. My birth mother was 19, and when they found out she was pregnant, they forced her to live in a Florence Crittenton home
Mm.
in Atlantic City. Um, and it was the same old story of, she doesn't have the means and can't care for a baby. You're too young, you're not married, that kind of
Right.
thing. Never mind that she came from a stable home, you know. But that being said, I had an aunt that wanted me. She, my aunt wanted my mother to give me to her.
That's the same as my story, but
Yeah.
that's a strange thing also for your birth mother, for mine as
hmm
well. It's like, okay, well, that's a strange thing.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing that. I
Oh,
can imagine growing up as the child in your aunt's home with your aunt as your mother, but your real mother is your
yeah.
aunt.
Yeah.
And then for her, that just, and that's apparently how she felt. So she made the choice not to do that, which became a problem between her and her sister.
There's just to back up and not to judge them at all, but you think instead of taking the baby, why not help both of them, right?
hmm Right,
That's the
right.
interesting thing there.
Yeah. So I was born there in the home. And I was a forceps delivery. And I know that I've heard other people talk about young birth mothers being heavily drugged
Yeah.
back then.
Yeah.
And then the forceps had to be used because they were unable to assist naturally in the birth.
Oh,
That's
so
been a problem for
barbaric,
me.
isn't it? Just
Mm,
barbaric.
hmm As a
makes me
result,
cringe.
that my atlas is tilted and rotated a little bit. It has been my whole life. It's a shame nobody checked babies back then to see
No.
like, is everything lined up okay?
How
Um,
does that how did that affect you then? I don't know much
well,
about that. So,
yeah, I have migraine. I've had migraine attacks since middle school. Some believe it's related to that.
Mhm.
But I also have a connective tissue disease called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome.
Mhm.
ooh, yeah, I have that.
And so, twisting and pulling on an
Hmm.
infant's neck and
Mhm.
head was a really bad idea, but nobody would have known at
No.
the time. So I don't know. There are some people, like massage therapists or chiropractors I've been to who think that my body is forever trying to line up with that top vertebrae. So I don't know. It's just, it's one of the many, sometimes we call them weird, sometimes we call them interesting things about me.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, she went through that, and then she was, in her words, forced to take care of me for 2 weeks, before I was adopted. Um, she said that the nun said it was a punishment for getting
Oh,
pregnant young and unmarried
oh,
and being a sinner.
yeah. Here, so you take care of your baby that you'll now have to hand over.
Do you imagine?
No, no, it's just it stops me in my tracks, even though we know these things. It's awful.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
So, my parents that adopted me were wonderful people. Um, I really embrace the word lucky. I know some people hate it, and I know that there's some unluckiness with, being given up in the first place and all, but I really lucked out with my adoption, with who adopted me and how I grew up. Um, and they did everything like the best they could. They were lied to some degree. The agencies tell the parents stories that make it sound good.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that that's all they knew. Before adopting me, they had 6 foster babies, um, very young infants. And then they had a seventh when I was 6 years old. But my mother by then was 46. And it was hard on her and apparently very hard on me because I thought he was my brother.
Yeah.
And it didn't occur to me, there's so many things that, you talk about the coming out of the fog. It's so true because there's so many light bulb moments I've had over
Yeah.
the past year or so where I thought, oh, all those foster babies might have been babies waiting to be adopted.
Yeah, you never.
And this
Oh,
was still in New Jersey?
Yeah. And then they
So was
couldn't
he
have
then,
it.
was he then that adopted out? So you felt his loss, or?
Yeah. I remember taking him somewhere,
mm,
and being very upset.
I'm sure.
Um, and I was told that these babies just needed someone to care for them because their parents couldn't. And in my mind, that meant that the parents were just like sick or something and needed someone to watch their kid for a little bit.
Right.
I have two
It's,
questions. One, were you told you were adopted at
Yes,
then? And number two, were you the first and only child that they adopted and kept?
they, yeah, I'm the only adopted child, but I had a sister who was 12 when I was born.
oh, much
And was
older.
she a biological sister?
Yeah, she was, yeah,
I'm just trying to get this straight in my head. So they had one
Hmm.
biological child, they had 7 total foster kids, and then they adopted you. Do you know why that,
Yeah.
like,
yeah. I think that for a while they weren't trying to have another kid and they were just wanting to serve their community. I mean, they were those people. They were
Mhm.
always volunteering. They were always giving to others. My aunt was a counselor, and I think that that may have either it was just something all the family kind of leaned towards, was helping others, or maybe her influence was part of it. I don't really know. And then they started trying to have another baby and couldn't get pregnant and put in for adoption. They were told it would be a 4-year wait. Well, first they were told they couldn't adopt because they were 38 at the
Yeah, I was
time.
gonna say older because you had the older sister. Hmm.
Right. And her argument was, you let us have foster babies. Why can't, we want to raise a child. Why can't we have our own? It doesn't sound like any of these foster babies were ever like they never considered adopting them. It was like
interesting.
a way station or something, maybe.
Huh,
Oh, you
yeah.
never found that out, actually?
Mm-mm,
Okay.
no.
And also, I
And
guess if
I
you don't
can,
come out of the fog till much later, you don't even really
Oh,
think
to
about
ask
those
the
things at that,
question.
right?
I
Yeah.
know. yeah, I wish I had thought to ask my mother years ago when she was alive, like, what's the deal with the foster babies? Like what, but yeah,
Where were they? Yeah, what were you?
Yeah.
yeah. I can say with certainty that they were well cared for and loved in our home.
Yeah.
Um, when they were very small, and so anyway, they had put in for adoption. They were told it'd be 4 years, and then 2 years later, they got a call out of the blue that said, "We have a baby." And so then, they went and met with the agency, and I don't really know whether they went to the Florence Crittenton Home and got me, or whether the agency got me, and then,
Mm-hmm. Made the
so you have,
handoff.
yeah, and you have those questions about like what happened during those 2 weeks
Me too. I
because
don't
Mhm.
know where, I don't know who put me like where was I? Where did they pick me up from? I still don't
yeah,
know.
I imagine the home had a nursery of some sort. The
Yeah.
babies probably slept in a line of cribs in there, so that's probably where I was. They probably made her feed and diaper me, but I don't know what else. And I've always wondered if I was breastfed
Yeah.
because I asked the home, I wrote to the Florence Crittenton Home on their Facebook page and I asked if they have any idea because someone suggested to me that a lot of those babies that stayed long enough were probably breastfed because formula was so expensive
Mm.
and they wouldn't have wanted to spend the money on these babies.
Yeah, not to do with health reasons, just gosh.
And
What a shameful
I,
period of
yeah, I
time.
can't imagine breastfeeding for 2 weeks and then
No,
Mm.
the
how
bonding that goes
heartbreaking.
on. No.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I knew I was adopted. They said they started when I started asking how babies were born, they told me about being adopted. I don't remember any of that. I do know that they also then at 4 sent me to therapy because I started, according to my sister, pulling on my clothing or something, and they thought I was upset or anxious over hearing that I was adopted. So they sent me to a therapist, which was pretty
I
progressive
was
of
gonna
them.
say that is
Or
progressive even. Yeah.
1968 or whatever. Yeah.
Right, right.
Curious about your sister. How
Mm-hmm.
so here she is, this 12-year-old, and she's got a, rotating, a
Babies.
door of babies coming through. Then you come along and you stay. And did you have her, and she's so much older than you. Did you have a relationship with her or?
Yeah, so I was the much anticipated, baby that was gonna stay, I guess. They were very I'm sure everyone was excited. I know she loved me very much. Part of what has triggered my coming out of the fog was her death, three
Oh,
years ago, two and a half,
Oh,
two
I'm
and a half
sorry.
years
sorry.
ago.
Yeah, sorry.
It was great as long as I was a child.
Oh.
So and then going
Adoptees
forward,
are forever children, by the
Yeah.
way.
yes, I was
Compliant child.
yeah, I was infantilized by her, um, and probably others, but especially by her. I think that she was
You're like her
everything
little
was
doll, like her
yeah,
little baby. Yeah.
yeah. And I brought it up in later years because we have a family business and we've had to be involved with that, and it's been super difficult, and mostly because I think what I realized is that her core message to me is that I didn't belong.
Mm.
I love you, but you don't belong.
This is
And
my
so,
family business, and you're younger. You get all
right,
sorts of things there. Hmm.
right. She had done things like literally in business meetings suggest that I sit in a corner.
Oh my
Oh
goodness.
gosh.
What?
Yeah, it's like I just did so many biting remarks, so much, but it was so great when I was little. She was like a younger, cool mother to me as a
Mhm.
child. Took me everywhere. I hung out with her and her friends. And she was a really caring person, and I know that she loved me. And I brought it up once. I said, I think that you've always resented me. And she said, I don't know if that's true. And I said, it's okay. It makes sense. it'd be really hard to be 12 and have this baby show up and change your entire life. She said, no, but you were really cute. And I said, okay, I could be cute and you could resent me. And she said, no, but I really loved you. I said, okay, I could be cute and you love me. And you really didn't like the impact I had on your life, the way I changed your relationship with our
Yeah.
parents,
Yeah.
etc.
Well, and as you get to be an adult, there's all those things, I have an older brother who's not adopted, 5 years older. So you have that whole dynamic of you're the sweet little sister and you're still always this little sister. And you're like, well, no, I'm actually a grown up and I know how to do things and I can, it's, it's a strange role. And 12 years is a big gap.
It's huge. You're different people, different lives.
Yes.
So just to go back to your story, at 4 years old, they send you to therapy. Did that continue for a while? And what?
I don't know. I don't know. I guess it was fine for a while until I was 9 in third grade. They used to have, I don't know if they still do this, they'd have like a luncheon where you bring in a dish from your ethnic origin.
Oh, yes.
Mm,
Well, for an adoptee, um, I brought Swedish meatballs because my dad's mother was Swedish and made meatballs, and I
Yeah.
brought those, but I didn't know that I was Swedish. And I lied and told the class that I was Cherokee Indian.
Oh, I used to say that too.
Well, that's definitely more interesting, right?
I was fascinated with
The lies.
Indians, with Native
Yeah.
Americans. Never mind that the Cherokee never lived in New Jersey.
At least
Um,
I could somewhat get away with it because I was in Missouri and Oklahoma
Yeah.
was
You
close.
could pull it off.
yeah. And then someone found out that it was a lie. I probably
Uh-huh.
admitted it because I'm a terrible liar. And then it got really rough
Yeah.
because I was bullied for lying
Mm.
and made fun of. And so then I was back in therapy for a while. And I have one vague memory of being in a therapist's office. It was probably like play therapy, like they do with children. There were a lot of toys. That's my only memory of that. Um, and then later, when I was 16, 17, I was very rebellious.
Mm.
And I was cutting school and I was getting in trouble, and back to therapy I went. But that time I was more angry about it because I felt
Yeah.
like I was being punished.
Yeah. Like, I'm not going to say anything to these people. You can't send me off to.
Mhm. Yeah. You're going to tell my mother.
Yeah. And probably so back then, maybe.
Maybe.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had those times like when I was probably in that third grade age range where I would blame things on my biological mother. If she hadn't given me up, none of this would be happening.
Mhm.
Whatever this was, whatever normal kid, drama I was going through, I would blame her from time to time. But other than that, I didn't want to meet her. I didn't have any real draw to knowing more. But in seventh grade, I started taking a French class and we had to pick names. And I picked the name Danielle. And I came home and I was excited and said, guess what? We picked names and I picked Danielle. My mother went pale and sat down and said, why did you pick that name? I said, because it's pretty. I like it. And she said, I've got to tell you something. She said, that was your name when we adopted you.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, we don't know what
Like what you hear, what a baby can
yes, what
absorb,
Uh-huh.
of all
I think we'd,
names.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So then I said to her, well, you need to tell me what else you know. And she said, well, we know she was 19. We know that she was in college to be a teacher.
Oh, same with
Um,
my mother, but she wasn't. But yes.
that she couldn't take care of you and wanted you to go to a good Christian home. And I think they said that she played the violin, which was true. So they had little bits of information that the agency had told them.
Nothing that's
And I,
super helpful for
It's
one's life,
so
right?
yeah, it's so weird.
It's
Like I
like
always knew I was
superficial.
Hungarian, but that's
Yeah,
it. I'm like,
tall,
yeah.
athletic, thanks. What about any cancer in the family? You know,
Right,
It's
right.
all strange.
unhelpful information.
But it's also what
And
they
that,
were told, right? Like
Right.
verbally.
But I wasn't saying the parents, I was
No,
saying
no. The
yeah,
whole narrative.
system, you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
right. And that's this systematic or systemic line about they
Mhm.
loved you so much.
Yeah. So
She
They loved you
confused.
cared
so
so
much
much
they had to
about
give
you.
you away. Yeah.
I'm so confused by that. You know,
Hmm.
it's just not the line to use if you're listening out there.
Yeah, right, right. And then, fast forward years later, I had my first son. So, like a lot of people, having a baby starts you thinking about things. And because I didn't know I had EDS then, but I knew I had a lot of health issues. And I did also have a congenital heart defect.
Mm.
So, having a kid, you wonder, what are you passing down? And so I was telling my mom about that, and she said, well, maybe you can get some information from the agency. And she gave me the information to contact them. So I
How
did. She
how old were you when this went on? 30s or
28,
20, 28? Okay.
and she was very supportive. She thought it was a great idea that I find out anything I can find out. And so I I did that, and they did the whole non-identifying information thing, and you pay your fee, and I don't, it took a while, probably over a
I
year.
get
It
to
might have taken,
pay to find out some superficial information.
it was pretty in depth. It was
Oh,
three
that's good.
pages of information.
Oh.
And I guess the social worker said that the social worker from then, like her notes, said that she had formed a friendship with my mother and really enjoyed visiting her. And so I guess she visited more, and she was really forthcoming, as I am, like an open book. So she learned a lot. But it was crazy because during that meeting, the social worker was holding the file, like this,
Yeah.
on her desk.
You just
And
want to
I've got my
grab it.
copy, and she's got her copy. And then she holds it up and she says, let me see if there's anything else I can tell you. And she's
Oh,
looking through it. And I could read the whole front of it. And I could read their names and their addresses.
oh, because of the light, how she's holding it.
And well, it was like a manila
Oh,
folder or
like
something, or like,
flip. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, so the front of it, they must fill in the front maybe or something. So yeah, I was reading it, but I couldn't get a pen and paper and write it all down. Um, the moment I left there, I wrote down what I could remember, but this was 1990, uh, probably 94. So I didn't really, the internet wasn't what it is now.
Yeah.
I
No.
couldn't, you, now you can Google half of a word and get what you're looking for. And,
Yeah.
I could only remember some initial, like a first initial, three-letter first name of my birth father, and some of the last name. And then they gave me some pamphlets and things about searching for your birth parents. And I went home and I just sort of put it on the back burner for a while. And then I read them, and then I didn't feel like I identified with any of it. None of it felt relatable. The all the writing, like everyone sounded so angry. And I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel angry at her, and I didn't feel angry at my parents. Um, so I just didn't do it. And then I had the second child a little over 2 years later. And both of these boys are blonde and blue-eyed.
Mm.
And both my husband and myself are dark hair and dark eyes. And I started thinking, okay, now I'm more curious about her and what she looked like, and what else I could learn about health stuff. And so finally I contacted them, and they, another fee and another few months while they searched for something. I don't know, because they had already pulled up my records. But anyway, it's probably all in a box in a basement somewhere, right? Because it was 30
I
by
think
then.
it's fascinating how you're sitting across from someone just to go back and they're holding your file.
They have all this information about you that you're not allowed to have. I mean,
And you
it's
go
just,
home and you still don't have it. But
it's
there is
really not
still
okay.
blows my mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It's really surreal if you stop
Hmm.
and think
Mm-hmm.
about what that means, that they've got your history and all that in front of them, and that you're just getting, she was in school and she was this
Yeah,
and
yeah.
she
Let me
liked,
see what else I can tell you. You've had your own child. You're sitting
She
in front
likes
of me.
art and I
I can't
she
right,
hand this.
played softball. I'm like,
Just hand
yeah,
you the
right.
file. Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
it's ridiculous.
So then they did the search and they started with marriage records in New Jersey and nothing came up. And then just I think she said like just for the heck of it, they called the phone number on the file. And my grandmother answered.
Oh my God.
She had never moved, she had never changed her phone number.
In all that time, wow.
Hmm. And so they said, well, and in the meantime, they told me to write a letter that they would give to
Because they're
her,
still
sit
being the
down.
gatekeepers. They're not going to give you the phone number or let you do this. They're being the gatekeepers. I went through that with
Right.
my agency. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know that I didn't know any different. It
Right.
wouldn't
Of
have
course.
occurred.
Same. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I wrote the letter. I have the rough draft still because it was before we had a computer, but we didn't use them the same way. So I wrote it all out. And it's like a lot of adoptees. I wrote my history, my life, my education, my kids.
I don't want to interrupt your life.
Exactly. I'm not here to get, involved in your life. I want nothing from you. I just want you to know. And I meant it. I wanted her to know that I was okay. I wanted her to know that I respected her decision, what I thought was her decision. Um, I wanted her to know that yeah, that I was okay. Like I couldn't imagine having a kid and giving him up and never thinking about it. You think about it all the time.
Yeah.
Um, at the end, I put my phone number and I said, if you have any interest in meeting, let me know. And so they got the letter to her. She called me the day she got the letter
Mm.
and she was ready. And my mother was here. My mother answered the phone and came in to find me because I was sleeping in the other room. And she said, your mother's on the phone. Your mother's on the phone. And I was like, you've lost your mind because you're my mother. She's like,
Yeah.
it's her,
That's
it's her. So
so they talked
she,
So she wouldn't
first.
even been 50 yet, right? She was in her late 40s. Or no, this was a couple years later than, so
yeah,
you, okay. Maybe she was in her
yeah.
50s, I guess, right?
So I talked to her. It was great. And then she says, you have a sister. Here she is. And she put her on
Oh,
the phone.
wow.
That was a
Tell
shock.
him. Yeah.
Yeah.
How much
Be-
younger was she?
she's 13 years younger.
Mm.
So she didn't have children for quite a while
Yeah.
after.
And
Yeah.
she had known about me for 3 years, but I didn't know about her. So you know how it is. Like you go into this expecting to find a mother and not thinking about a sibling or a father. At least
No,
I didn't.
no.
So it was a little uncomfortable, but it was fine. I mean, she's great. We got it was fine, just awkward. And then my and then if, I'm trying to not take too long. The In November of that year, my mother invited my birth mother and my biological sister to Thanksgiving.
And where was your father? Was he already passed?
Um,
Your adoptive
ne-
father.
no, neither of them were gone.
Oh, okay.
I skipped this thing. In between there, in August, my birth mother came out here to visit.
So this was the
So
first time you were meeting. How long had you been talking on the phone prior to
since
meeting?
June, two
Okay, so a
months.
couple months.
Yeah.
It was a little soon for me, but she was a teacher and it was the only time she thought she could get away. So she came and it was great. It was really great. A lot of similarities, a lot of, and I had my two little boys then, so she got to meet her grandkids and,
You were living in California at this point?
hmm
Okay, and
yeah,
so was she still in the East Coast, like Jersey
yeah.
or okay.
She was in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Yeah. Then they came for Thanksgiving. Um, and that was really surreal also because
Ugh.
all of a sudden my two mothers met my two sisters met. But it went really well. We were I think everyone was happy with it. And then some more time goes by and my birth mother knew where my birth father was.
And had she
She had
been
known,
open with you about him up to that point?
yeah, yeah. They were dating in high school and still at the end of high school when she got pregnant. And so but the the story is a little unclear. You know, it's definitely unclear on his side. She seemed pretty certain of everything that happened. And she said that she could share there was like a medical form. I think the
Mm-hmm.
agency provided it that she filled out for me. And she said she could give him a copy if I wanted.
Because
And
was
I
the
said,
heart stuff on her side or his
Yeah.
side?
I never found out.
Oh,
It's not a direct thing that gets passed down, and it might be part of the EDS.
okay.
Mm.
So it's just hard to know. I had it surgically fixed in 91. So it was already fixed before I met them.
Mm-hmm.
And then so she was going to give him this form and she arranged through a friend to meet with him. And he almost didn't go, but his new wife encouraged it. And she's wonderful. I refer to her as my stepmother and he's great too. Um and but in the beginning we heard from him through an attorney saying they wanted a DNA sample because he felt unsure of, 30 something years earlier being, 18 years old.
Yeah.
And she was undergoing chemotherapy at the time and she was very upset by this. And so I told her that I would handle it. I just didn't want her to deal with it. So I wrote back and I basically said, I'm not giving DNA to a stranger. Um, I I just wanted you to know you've got a daughter and you've got grandkids, and I wanted to know my medical history on your side if possible. But if not, that's fine. I've lived this long without it. I can continue. And I just sort of that was it.
Yeah.
Um, Months later, I was going to a wedding in New Jersey, and the person getting married was my cousin, my biological, on my mother's side cousin. Her mother, my aunt, married my birth father's brother's high school friend.
What? So they're all there?
So they all know each other, but he wasn't connected to them anymore. But I realized he would know who these people are. So I sent a postcard to him and I said, if you've had a change of heart, I'll be in town for so and so's wedding. She's the daughter of blah, blah, blah. I'll stay at my parents'. Here's the phone number. And I just mailed it off. And I thought,
That,
see what happens. Days later, we were at my parents' house. Everyone's sitting around the kitchen table and the phone rings. And my dad went into the kitchen and he used to love speakerphone. So he puts the phone on speakerphone and this man says, can I speak to Cary, please? My dad says, who's calling? And he said his name. And my dad says, by golly, you're her father.
Oh,
And
it's kind of
everyone just
strange
sort
that
of,
like your mom answered for your mom and your dad answered for your dad. Very
exactly.
interesting.
And
Not always
everyone
the
was like
case.
mid-bite, and just dropped their forks and looked at me. Uh, so yeah, I talked to him and he said, would it be all right if we come up near there and stay in a
oh.
hotel and meet you? So they did, and we met the next day. And after I talked to him, I said, yeah, I'll do a DNA test. I just wasn't going to do it by order of a lawyer,
Yes.
or request. But yeah, it was kind of crazy how all that happened.
And the DNA test obviously proved yes.
Yeah, so
And did he have other kids?
he had a son 3 years after I was born. So I had a brother, but he died in a car accident when he
Oh,
was, I think he was 19.
oh, that's sad for them.
And so he
Yeah, I
didn't
know.
have any other kids?
Mm-mm.
So it must have been poignant for
Yes.
him to meet you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he said to me, he said, I hope this isn't an insult, but you're the spitting image of your mother in high school. She had blonde hair and blue eyes, but okay. Everyone says I look like her.
Mannerisms and all of it. Yeah.
hmm
Yeah. Yeah, and he had the DNA results sent to me. So I opened it, I read it, and then I called him and I told him, and he said something like, "What? Damn, I'm a grandpa."
Oh,
Aw, so
it's
this has
healing
now
for
been how
him.
many years, right?
Yeah.
It's been more than 20 years at this point with all this?
Well, all of that happened in the no, I met her in 97. I met him in 98, and then she died in 99.
Oh, she did
Oh,
die. Oh,
She died
of cancer.
yeah.
I was with her when she died.
Mhm.
I went out there and went to the hospital and stayed with my sister and kind of, we got each other through that. Again, a little bit surreal because I didn't really know my role.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the daughter that showed up that lives in California. My sister clearly wanted me there, but some others didn't really, like my
Mm.
aunt. I don't think she was happy about me showing up. And prior to that, my
And was
aunt,
this the aunt that wanted to raise you?
yeah,
Yeah, nice.
Huh, interesting.
yeah. And prior to my mother's death, my aunt and I got along, and my uncle is a super nice guy. And I met my cousins at that wedding. I met all these people that I was related to
Yeah.
for the first time, you know. But then at the end, she kind of, I think I might have seen her once after that, and then she kind of made it clear she didn't want to talk to me or to my sister, unfortunately.
What? That's so strange.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Unresolved issues.
and
Her
that's
right,
problem.
then that's
right.
hard. That's hard for you. It's like finding
Yeah,
family, losing family all at once.
I know. I have said to my sister, I'm sorry if I'm the reason that,
Mhm.
Aunt Carol doesn't talk to you. But I also know it's not me. It's not my fault.
No.
Um, I couldn't do anything about it. And I tried to have a relationship. I've actually written to her twice in the past year because I just thought, why not give it a try? And I've gotten no response at all.
But
That's
you and your sister are still close?
Yeah, my sister and I are close. We are 13 years apart. We're in very different parts of our lives.
yeah.
But when we're together, there's that DNA bond. You just feel it. It's just
hmm
it's strange. And then there was the whole weirdness of my sisters not being sisters
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
because my older sister, I think, really wanted to be my younger sister's sister.
oh, she wanted she wanted to be involved.
Hmm. But she would interject in strange ways and
Yeah.
make my younger sister uncomfortable. Um, it was
It's an interesting, it affects adoption affects everybody, siblings who aren't your siblings. It's very because what's her role? She's like, wait, you have a new sister that you're so connected with just naturally.
right.
And she's like your mom caretaker, 12 years older.
Hmm.
They have a huge gap.
Hmm.
I mean, like
Right.
a
Very
large guard.
large, got
Yeah.
25 years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So I live sort of as adoptees do in such a duality,
Yeah.
right.
you
Two
know,
worlds.
in two worlds, in the world of this sister and this sister. Um and I think,
And shouldering it all, right? Like you
Mhm.
feel responsible for everybody's feelings.
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, I've never really had any of the guilt that adoptees sometimes have. I am not a people pleaser. I'm actually
Good for you.
Lucky
Come
you.
on over and help me.
I might be a little too independent at times or
Yeah.
too, I think that's a little bit, I know you're going to talk about attachment styles,
Yeah.
and I've talked about that with my therapist, and I think I have a blend of secure but also avoidance a little bit
Yes.
where I just said, I don't need you. I'm good. Kind of
Yeah.
like with my birth father and that first thing, I was like, well, F you. I don't need you. I'm fine, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not, I've never been suicidal. Um, I am a bit of a perfectionist, and I do think that some of it's natural and some of it may have been a way of my sister and my older sister and my parents had a lot of issues. And so I already started out as like the chosen one. And then I probably honed my perfection in some areas to stand out,
Mm-hmm.
to be
And
better or to be.
what made you come out of the fog? And was it recent? Because it sounds like it was fairly recent, right? So I
Yeah.
mean, everything was kind of
Adding
obviously when you
up.
Yeah,
come out of
Yeah.
the fog, it's a whole life changer. So
it
what?
is. Yeah. So it was my sister's death, I've realized.
Mm,
Mm.
My parents were so much older. They were 40 years older. They died in 2011 and 2015. And then I was left with her being my only connection to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started realizing that I felt kind of adrift
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't know why. And I felt like I was, again, like sort of stuck or sort of in the middle. As much as I'm a blend of things, like I'm definitely a blend of all four parents. I'm a blend of my different situations and attachment styles and stuff, but I'm not very comfortable with being like in between.
Yeah.
I um I have often felt that I belong places but don't fit in.
Yeah.
So it's not so much the reverse. It's more like I belong here because I'm a member of this whatever, but I don't necessarily fit in. And I think it comes from an internal thing. It's
Yeah.
not other people making me feel that way, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So when she died, I think that's what started it. And I started looking up a little more about adoption and joined the Facebook group. And I don't know in what order, like when I started listening to your podcast, um, I was getting so much out of it. And there were times where I didn't relate to people, but that makes sense. We're all different humans
Mm-hmm.
and different experiences. Um, but there've been a lot of times where I've gone,
Right.
yes.
Same for us. I mean, on an interview, we'll have the same moment, for us as well,
Yeah.
hearing this story.
Yeah. And that's when I think I started talking to my therapist about it a little more. And then I started realizing like she's doing her best, but I kind of I need something else or someone else.
Yeah.
And I found my therapist through that adoption group on Facebook. And she's adopted. And so you all and your interviews and she and our sessions have all given me language to use
Mm-hmm.
to explain my feelings, to examine that further and more light bulb moments.
Yeah.
I take notes when she says things, and so many times I'm just like, again, like, oh yeah, yeah, that's it, exactly.
Yeah. It's like if you can name something, it's so helpful. I feel there's so many things in life where I'm like, what was that? Why? But when you have a name for, oh, that was hypervigilance, or no wonder I had these bad dreams, or whatever it is, right? That's just an
Mm-hmm.
example.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very healing. And the community, obviously, just finding the community
and it's
Yeah.
still, I know for me, we started our podcast 3 years ago, and
Mhm.
I mean, there's still stuff that I'm discovering
Every
and
day. Yeah.
coming
Yeah.
into and having to heal and like, oh my gosh, there's more,
Yeah.
I do have another question before we wrap up. Are you still in relationship with your father?
Yeah.
Yeah, I am. It was hard at the beginning. Um, I think one reason is that I think he was so excited and wanted to be my father. And I already had a father.
Yeah.
Um, but I really liked him. I liked him being in my life, but he wanted me to call more. And I felt like I don't even call my parents that much.
That's how I am. Everybody always wants me to call so much. I'm like, I don't call anybody. Call Sarah.
Yeah. So we got through that and we had some really meaningful discussions and that got better over time. And he was understandably guarded. I won't get into his story, but he has good reason to have been mistrustful and
Mm.
unsure of things. And he is a really great person. And so it's built over the years. Last year, in June, my younger son graduated from UCLA, and my birth father and his wife came out for the graduation. But it also happened to be Father's Day and my birth father's birthday. And we'd never spent those together.
All at once,
Aw.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really great. It
And
was good.
your kids know everybody, your two boys.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
right,
nice.
right. So
Congratulations on the UCLA graduation, by the way.
thanks. Yeah, yeah. Both my sons have done very well and we're really proud. Um, yeah, and I figure, the more grandparents, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And I had another grandmother for a little while after I met my birth mother. Her mother was a little bit in my life to the extent that when I went out there, I saw her. And then she also turned her back on me
Mm.
um, towards the end after Pat died.
I just don't understand that. I mean, all these years, here I would raise her, but now I'm turning my back. And, what is the big thing? It's
She
just,
was a really unhappy woman, a really,
yeah,
really miserable woman. And I don't know what happened, but I didn't take it personally. I I know, I was kind of like, well, easy come, easy go.
yeah,
I have a grandmother, now I don't.
Mm.
yeah.
But and this last year, the other thing I realized from your podcast is that I didn't have my original birth certificate.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. And when I found after hearing about something, I looked at mine and I realized that they were all dated. I had two different copies and they were dated February of 1966. And I was born November of 64.
That was probably your adoption finalization.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, 15 months later.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to I wrote to the state of New Jersey and they first sent me they made a mistake and sent me the same one. And I was so disheartened and I thought they're gonna say it doesn't exist
Yeah.
or something. It's lost in a fire.
Fire, yeah.
There's been a flood.
Another,
Right.
But when I called, I talked to a really nice woman who apologized profusely for making a mistake and she sent it to me. And I already knew all the information, but seeing it in writing is a
yeah,
piece of my history.
it
Mm-hmm.
is.
That we all deserve to have without
Yeah.
question, without a fight,
And
without
you,
having
And
to
for,
pay for it.
and you
yeah,
and I are living in a state where they can't get them still. California of all states. You can't get
yeah,
your original birth certificate.
yeah, no, that doesn't make any sense. I
No.
mean, I've realized it's a tangible piece of who you were when you were born.
Yeah.
Um, but I didn't think about it until I was like 57 years old.
It is. Well, it seems to be the time, when all this hits you, right? I mean, uh, anecdotally from our podcast, it feels like right around your 50s when some people younger, but average, it seems like you don't really start thinking about this on a deep level until you get to this age.
Hmm.
Maybe we're at an age where we can handle it, or I don't know I don't have a
Yeah.
speculation on that, but
Yeah.
it does seem to be very normal in this
Hmm.
world. So,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
a long journey. I mean, you're a year in, we're 3 years in, and it's still, like I said a
Still a
few minutes ago,
journey.
you're still,
Yeah.
We,
stuff still comes up. I still am facing stuff
yes.
almost every day. I just started EMDR therapy and,
Yeah.
just,
Yeah, I started writing and I've always
Yes.
loved writing. So
Helps.
I'm writing everything out and I'll get out my folder and all my info and I'll read through it and then I'll be all into it for a few days and then I'll just have to put it aside for a
Mhm.
little
Yeah.
bit.
Pull
It's
Yeah.
back a
just
little.
too much.
It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
We just spoke to someone recently who was much older, still going through it. I mean, and it's a lifetime sometimes. This is the reality.
Mhm.
Do we
Yeah.
Well,
ever
Cary, this has
fully
been
heal? Yeah.
a great conversation. And thank you for
Thank
coming on
you.
and for being, for choosing us to
Yes.
tell your story for the first time. We
Thank you
really
for
are
having
grateful for
me.
that. Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
it's great. It was so great to meet you all.
It's
So
great
great
to
to meet
meet
you
you.
too.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks.
And please stay in touch.
I think you cut out, but okay, thanks.
Oh, yeah, Louise, you can stop the recording.